We just want to thank everybody as well for coming out this evening. We have a lot of different topics that the teachers will be presenting on. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to try to give everybody my best overview of the Common Core standards. And we're going to look at English language arts and then also math and look at the shifts within them. And what I mean by that is within each discipline, within English language arts and then also math, there's some changes for instruction that the teachers are going to have to undertake in order to meet these new high, lofty standards that have been created. And then we'll also talk about some practical things that maybe you can do at home to help support your children in English language arts and then also math. And as we're going through here tonight, if there's anything that you have a question about, don't feel bad about asking a question. You can stop me and don't hesitate about that, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have. And then the last 5 minutes of every session that you're in this evening is going to be designed for question and answer time. So hopefully I'll be able to work my way through our different parts here of our Prezi, and then the last 5 minutes we'll be able to answer any questions that you guys may have. So the first place that I would like to get started with is just a basic definition of what the Common Core standards are. It's a new set of standards that have been developed by state superintendents and then also national teachers unions and key educational stakeholders. I know there's a lot of information that's been out there, especially recently, about this is a curriculum that's been designed by the government and kind of pushed down to the individual schools. But I want to make sure that everybody's aware that a few years back, this was a conversation that our state superintendent was very involved with, that started out in Washington, D.C., in which there was a big meeting of the state superintendents from all across the United States. And you guys can come on in. We just got started, so feel free to come on in. A lot of the key stakeholders from around the United States were talking about there needed to be a new set of standards because more information continued to come out that the United States was falling behind other developed countries for students that were either career or college ready by the time that they graduated 12th grade in high school and went on to their next steps. And so the state superintendents started to talk about what could we do to make things better in our educational system K-12. And so that's eventually where this was created at. Like I said, I think an important part that everybody should be aware of is the Common Core standards were not developed by our senators and people that are serving in the House of Representatives. They were developed by our state superintendents, and our state superintendent had a leading seat at the table and basically took the Illinois Learning Standards and set them down and said, this is where our state has been. We've had these standards since 1997. We need to see an improvement. We need to see a growth. But specifically, our state had a seat at the table and was very involved in the process of developing these standards, as well as once the process got started, like I said, it was some key teachers from around the United States. People had input into this, and it wasn't just the government saying everybody needs to follow what these standards are stating. Within the standards themselves as well, essentially what they are and what they're asking the teachers to do with the students is to develop a set of skills at the end of each grade level that builds on itself. The teachers in our buildings and our districts have the authority and the ability to create the curriculum on their own that they feel hits these lofty standards. It's not a canned program that's given to us by the government and said you have to teach these different things. The teachers have the ability, if they see a standard and they work together on this or they find some resources around, then they have the ability to create that on their own. So it's something that even though all 45 states anyways have bought into this and are aligned to the Common Core state standards, your building still gets to make those individual decisions about how to reach these new lofty standards. And the first thing we'll take a look at tonight are the English language arts standards. So within here, there's going to be some shifts that the students are going to be asked to do, which are some skills that they may have never gone to before. And just so everybody's aware as well, the handout that was sitting at the table doesn't follow through with what this is. This will be posted so everybody will have access to this, and you can look through this as well after our sessions tonight. Within ELA, one of the things that all students are going to be expected to do as schools transition into the Common Core state standards is something called close reading. And what a close read is, to explain it, is basically the teachers will be giving the students shorter pieces of text. So instead of telling your students, okay, I want you to read 30 pages out of your novel here in class today, they may give them just a paragraph. And as the teachers go through that, the teachers will read it aloud themselves. Then they'll have the students read it independently, and then they'll give them specific questions that are called text-dependent questions that the students will have to go back and refer to what's in that shorter piece of text but they're much higher level thinking questions. What they're going to try to get away from are just kind of those who, what, where, when, why, how type questions. So the students would have to read this shorter piece of text, go through it, and then perhaps infer something that the text is stating, and kind of take it to that next level. Now this is not to say that all those questions that I just mentioned are going to go away. That's kind of your building block in order to build the students' knowledge. As they give them these shorter pieces of text, they're going to build up their background knowledge, but eventually what we want our students to be able to do is to really critically examine a smaller piece of text as compared to reading something much larger. And where this is going to be taking place at, especially in our building in more greater numbers, is going to be within the science and social studies classrooms. In order for our students to be prepared to reach these high standards, it can't just be within our reading classes in which we're teaching reading. And so our science and social studies teachers have been working with the reading teachers on their teams, as well as things that we've been doing within our staff development programs to make sure that they're equipped to handle this. And so it's basically, it's a very close reading of what the text is. You have to really examine it. What they're eventually going to be encouraging the students to do as they go through these shorter pieces of text is to mark it all up. If there's a word that you don't understand, you need to underline it. If there's some phrases in there that are unfamiliar, you need to mark that up. And then you have those conversations, whether it's with your table mate or asking your questions to your teachers. It allows you to engage in more dialogue and discussion. And as we look at some specific ways to look at this, students may be looking at a 4 to 7 sentence paragraph for multiple class periods. And the teacher may ask them a lot of different questions about that short piece of text. But what they really want the students to be able to do is to think critically as they're looking at these short pieces of text and be able to go back and forth with that and work with that instead of reading, maybe 5 or 6 pages out of the textbook, answering your, 5 or 6 questions and then moving on from there. So they're really trying to instill with the students how to critically think their way through those pieces of text. Also, they're going to have an increase in reading nonfiction. And like I said, that's where our science and social studies teachers have to come in. During the middle school years, what the expectation is that about 55% of the reading that the students are going to be doing is nonfiction. And that's a change from the past. Typically, teachers would assign a lot of fiction. And one example that I can give to you in 8th grade right now, our reading teacher partners with the social studies teacher that they have one article per week that's directly aligned to what the social studies teacher is teaching, and the reading teacher introduces that in her classroom, and there's a lot of discussion and critically thinking about that. So again, that's how we're going to try to approach that, is within science and social studies. There may be a little bit more reading within there than what the students are typically accustomed to. And then also a big one that the Common Core standards ask our students to be able to do is to use evidence to support what their answer is. They don't want, as we look at what the standards are set at, they don't want students just to say, well, I think it means this. So if the students are expected to read something, they're going to have to go back to what they had just read or something that they looked at and said, well, according to the text, it states this, and then they draw some sort of conclusion from it. So those are some big differences that the students are going to have to become accustomed to. And like I said, this is not fully implemented with our staff yet. This is something that's going to take time because it's a different approach to teaching. But slowly but surely, the teachers are getting on board with learning different methods to be able to do this with our students. A couple of examples of some ways to help at home is, number one, that conversation with your child about what they're reading. Some things that I've found is some good questions that we could ask our children. Who's your favorite author? What ideas does this author write about? Why do you like this author? Is there different things that are going on within the story that you really appreciate that the author is doing? That would be one way or one example in which you could try to help support what the teachers are doing here at school. Another component to the Common Core standards, on top of the reading standards that the students are expected to reach, there's a lot of speaking and listening standards. So within their classrooms, the teachers are trying to reinforce these as well through different things that they're doing, whether it's role plays, whether they're watching news reports. And so this is another way, if you're watching a news report or a speech or something along those lines, engaging in that conversation with your child. What was that speaker talking about? What specifically were they trying to convince people of? Were they effective? And then following up with why were they effective? And that's the thing, as your children are answering you, the people that are behind the Common Core standards essentially say, if you can explain that why, going back to some evidence of what you've just seen, that's truly what we want our students to be able to do and what we want them to be able to reach as they get to the end of it. And again, it's something that's going to take a lot of support from us here at school and then support at home. But these are just some real quick examples, and then I'll show everybody a link to a site where I got some of these things so you can see there's a lot of examples. Every month the state board puts out what they call Capture the Core newsletters, and it goes through resources for teachers, resources for parents, and it's got information about the standards every single month, and they've been doing this for the last couple of years. So I'll show everybody how to get there, and then this will be available online tomorrow. Within math, what they've done and the way that instruction is changing in there, number one, they're trying to make math instruction more practical and more real-world based. And so they've come up with 8 practice standards for mathematics. This website, the link to this will be available to everybody. But I wanted to show this to you quickly. I know we're on a limited amount of time, but show everybody that's in here how to use this. So each one of the 8 mathematical practice standards will be on this page that it'll be linked out to. And then as you click into each one individually, there will be a short video that shows a teacher modeling one of these mathematical practice standards. So like the first one, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. What they mean by that is your children may be given a problem that they don't have a whole lot of experience working on. And the teacher may not spend 30 minutes going over in class exactly how to solve that problem step by step. What they ask is that the students have their general background knowledge, that they could at least get through part of that problem. And the key part here is that the teacher has to support them along the way. So as the student gets through, maybe it's a 3-step problem, if they get through step 1 and they can explain back to the teacher, I got this part completed, but I'm not sure how to go to this next step. That's where the teacher will have to come in and say, okay, this is the next thing that you're going to have to do. Based on what you've shown me on the work that you're going through, this is the next step in the process, and we want to see if you can get through step 2 on your own. And what the authors of the Common Core Standards have essentially told everyone is as these mathematical practices become more evident in all the classrooms, then the students will be able to reach some of the higher math standards that everybody's asking students are able to get to. So again, as you look at this, and I don't know how familiar anybody is with the Prezi, it's a little bit different than a PowerPoint. It doesn't look like it's linked in your button here. It's not going to turn into a hand. It'll just be an arrow, but if you just click on that, it'll take you right to the website. So you can see some of those in action. In terms of the math shifts, the first one is something that everybody feels is going to be beneficial for our students. You're going to learn more about less topics. So rather than trying to cram so many topics within one school year, they've really narrowed the focus on what the students will be learning, but they'll learn it to a much higher level. And one of our mantras this year is I've told all of our teachers, you need to give yourself permission to slow down. And what I mean by that is in years past, to get ready for the ISAT, there's a number of different standards that everyone has really felt a lot of pressure to get to before that time comes in March. And they want to try to teach all of these things so that way the students have some exposure to everything. Well, what research has found is that's not an effective way to teach, especially within math. And so we've told the teachers, it's okay to slow down. You know, in years past, maybe it took you 2 weeks to go through a certain concept. If it takes us 3 or 4 weeks this year, but every single student understands it, that's far more important than only half of your class getting it within that 2-week period. And with less standards to try to teach throughout the year, that gives us the ability to do that. So we've really stressed it's okay to slow down, and some teachers have come back and said, I'm glad that we talked about that because my students aren't getting this concept. And so we really do need to slow down. And I know the math teachers have commented multiple times, if a student comes home with a math problem and it's the first night and it's maybe not due for 2 or 3 more days, don't spend 3 hours on it at home that night. If you're spending what you feel is, you know, a good effort with the students and they're trying to get this thing done and they're feeling like, I can't do this, come back to the teacher the next morning or shoot them off an email. My son or daughter was trying on this. They really didn't understand it. Can you please help them tomorrow, whether it's in class or home base? And the teachers would rather have that happen than a student struggle for multiple hours over something that they're just not really understanding. So again, I encourage you guys to do that. Communicate with your math teacher. If your son or daughter's trying something, they're trying different things. It's the first night, maybe they get it on a Monday, it's not due till Wednesday. Let them know what the problems are and the struggles are so that way they can directly reteach what that information is with the students. They need to know. If they're not made aware of it, it's hard for them to really reteach to their students. The second one, the skills will be learned across grade levels. So things that are introduced maybe in 5th or 6th grade, those skills will continue to be taught in 7th and 8th grade but they'll be taught at a higher level and they'll be deepened. So it's going to be a connection across grade levels instead of, sometimes in the past we teach things in isolation. So that's a 6th grade standard, so we teach them in 6th grade, and maybe we don't revisit until 8th or 9th grade. Well, in that time lapse, students forget things. So it's important that we continue to go across grade levels with our students and we try to dig deeper with them and make sure that they're understanding what's going on. A lot of the math gurus with the Common Core stress speed and accuracy with your basic math facts. So if your child is struggling with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, we all understand how difficult algebra can be. And so this is a key thing that if, by the time students are to the middle school, if that's a concern, let your math teacher know right away. So that's something that they can work with the student on, and it's something that our teachers will see as well. If those basic math facts aren't down, the more complicated things that they're going to get into are very difficult to accomplish and achieve. And then also what they call know it, do it. So perhaps the students are going to be taught a concept in class, and then what the teachers will do is kind of turn the students loose. So they teach them a certain concept, and then the students will have time to practice it in class and try to apply some more math concepts to the real world and really working with them on that. So again, these are the shifts that we're trying to help the teachers become more familiar with and get our students working at some of these higher standards. In terms of some examples of some things to try to help at home, the first one is taken from a 6th grade suggestion. So let's say, for example, the family is planning a trip or the family has gone on a long trip. Have your son or daughter determine the average speed for that whole trip. Let them know how many miles you went, how long it took, and then turn it over to them and have them work on that and tell them to try to come back with you what the average speed was. Within the 7th grade is where the last two had come from, looking for some of those real-world math problems. So you're out to dinner on a Friday night, the bill comes and it's $50 for your family to eat. Talk to your son or daughter, how do you come up with that 15% tip? And hopefully it's not pull out the cell phone and multiply 50 times 0.15 and go from there, as I know many people like to do. But again, talking with them, trying to relate what you're doing out in the real world to the classroom. Another good example, and the last one is from the 7th grade as well that I really like, have them follow a stock, whether it's online or if you still get a newspaper at home, and then asking them to look at the percent change every single month. So they start following it November 1st, December 1st they look at it again, and whether that stock went up or down, then they need to see what the percentage change has been over that month time period to try to reinforce that the skills that teachers are teaching in the classroom are things that the students can apply within the real world. And all of our suggestions as far as ways to help come from this very last slide on here, the capture the core newsletters. And if you click on this one, what it'll take you to is a grid that's broken down by month, by year, and by grade level. So you can look into each one of these and it'll have specific standards that are applicable to your son or daughter depending on what grade level they're in. And I'll just pull up a 7th grade one from September, and they typically release these about in the middle of the month. These are really good resources that every time these come out, we send them out to the teachers so they can look through them. And like I said, the majority of the resources in here are going to be for the teachers, but if you're just curious about what are some of the things that my son or daughter's teachers are looking at and some of the techniques that are in here, you can take a look at these newsletters. But what I like for all of you is you scroll down through here. Every month there's going to be something that says parent resources. And it'll give you practical suggestions of some things that you can try at home or some things that you can work on with your son or daughter. And these are, like I said, these are put out by the State Board of Education once a month and have a number of people looking through all these important resources. So I know I've thrown a lot of information out here in a very short period of time. The next sessions, I think, start at 6:25. We have some time for question and answer, and if we're running a little bit behind, that's okay. What specific questions do all of you have in terms of anything that I've talked about or anything Common Core related that you may have heard or anything that I can help answer this evening?
So do you feel like this, in math, for example, does this approach still accommodate people with different abilities? I mean, what about the person who does get it on the first day? What are they going to do for the next 9 days if you're covering something for 2 extra weeks?
Yeah, and that's something that we have to continue to address, whether it's using some programs like IXL that we have or trying to use some of our other resources to accelerate those, because like you said, the difficult part for this is those that really get it after day 1 or those that don't get it after day 10. What do you do to accommodate those students and those learners? We have to continue to use our online programs that we have, so if, let's say, somebody gets it day one, that they're not just bored and stuck in class day and day and day for the next 9 days, whether it's using the IXL resources. Our teachers this year are piloting a series that a textbook company had contacted them with, in which there's just a lot of different resources that the teachers can pull from. If a student gets it right away, then they can try to differentiate upward to help them out, to try to enrich the material so they can give them some of these other sample, problems or things along those lines, so that way they can try to, push themselves. It may be a situation of a kind of a try it, do it thing where the teacher may give them quick instruction on it, but then the students will have to try some of that as they're trying to help the rest of the class move along, and then checking back in with the student, are you understanding what you're supposed to be doing? So it's definitely work in progress, and we're not there yet where it's optimum, where the teacher after day one, they can tell that a student has it right away and then they're going to be able to give this. But that's what the teachers are really working hard right now, is trying to develop all their resources to work with that situation that you're speaking of right away.
So is this going to be challenging for your 7th and 8th graders to jump into the middle of this? Maybe even your 6th graders?
Yeah, it's going to be a
how's
challenge.
That going to work for those, those kids who are kind of caught in the middle?
Yep. So what we've talked about a lot over the last couple of years is getting ready for this transition. We can't go 100% Common Core aligned because there's certain skills and factors that students, if they just start this, let's say it's this school year, there's some things that are going to be left out. So what the teachers are trying to do, and it's difficult, they're kind of working with 2 sets of standards. So the old Illinois Learning Standards, that some of those skills maybe that were in the 6th grade for the old standards that we've kind of gotten rid of, in the Common Core standards, those things may be found in 4th or 5th grade. So the teachers have tried to bring those things into class as well, and as much as we can be aligned to this, they're going to, but they realize you can't be 100% aligned in both reading and math because the skill set is much different than what they had been accustomed to. So what the teachers are trying to work on is making sure that the students, any gaps that they have, we talk about that a lot as well, you need to fill in what those gaps are. And as we look at our district, this year's 2nd grade class, when they were in kindergarten, they were the first class that was Common Core aligned from the very get-go in kindergarten. So until that class gets to every different level, they're going to have to fill in the gaps along the way. Okay. So in elementary buildings are having to do the same thing, where they have a good understanding that their 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, when they started school, they weren't 100% Common Core aligned, so they're trying to fill those gaps in as well. And essentially what our hope is along the way we can get the students prepared to this. And one thing we've talked about a lot this year is there needs to be an equal balance of pressure and support. So these new standards, there's a lot of pressure on our students and a lot of pressure in turn on you guys at home for your son or daughter to complete some of these activities. Here at school, our teachers need to be supporting them at that same level of pressure that they're giving the students, because if we're pressuring them way too much and we're not giving them assistance, they're not going to learn as much. But if we, our support equals the pressure that we're giving the students, then we feel like more learning can take place with them. But that's definitely a concern that we've had. This is my 4th year in the building, and this is the 4th year that we've looked at the Common Core standards and broken them down and tried to figure out practical ways to implement them. And that's always been a big concern of the teachers is, what do we do for those students that this wasn't around when they started school? So we need to continue to fill in those gaps and make sure that we're not leaving students behind. Other questions?
I have one more.
No, go
So the
right
end
ahead.
game is better ACT scores, SAT, better which resulting gets you higher acceptance into colleges, right? I mean, hopefully
For the
there's...
most part, what the end game is that every student that walks out of high school across the states that have adopted the Common Core are either college or career ready.
Okay.
So for those that are on the college path, that when they take their first set of freshman classes, that they don't have to take remedial classes, which has resulted in
So it's to
students that are in
reduce that
5 or 6
remedial.
years of
Okay.
college.
Yeah.
And then also for students, if they are not on the college path and they're more in the career path, that they're employable the day that they
Right.
walk across that stage
Okay.
and get a diploma. So it takes into account
good.
both sides. And on the high school side, it becomes a little bit more diverse in terms of what the standards are and the expectations for everybody. But we want
Good.
what the goal is everybody's either career or college ready the day that they walk across the stage, which business leaders and universities have gotten back to state superintendents saying that that's not the case. And when you look at the amount of students who have to take remedial courses in college, I mean, some of those numbers are very, very high, and it's not benefiting students to be in college for 5 or 6 years, and it's very expensive. And so, as some of you, if you have children in college, probably know what those costs are if they're in there a couple extra years. Any other questions? Well, again, I really thank you guys for coming out, and I'm sorry I've held you a little bit over time, and if you go to the next session, just blame the principal and it's my fault. I'll take the heat for it. So thank you, everybody.
So hopefully
Thank you.
we'll get more kids
Thank you.
with